Hi, this is Derek Murphy from creativity.com. Today I want to talk about book editing. And there are some times when you might want to pay for a professional book editor. There are other times when self-editing is more important. Whether you're going with a mainstream book publisher, they're going to put an editor on your case anyway, but that might just be proofreading. It's doubtful, even if you go with a traditional editor, they probably don't have time or resources to pay for a content editor who's really going to revise the story. They might just do final checking or proofreading for mistakes, typos, grammatical errors. But when you're self-publishing, you have to make these decisions on your own. And it can be a lot of money. If you're thinking about hiring a really good content editor, average pricing starts around 2 cents per word for even just basic proofreading. And it goes up to 4 cents a word or 6 cents a word for content editing or development. When you're paying that much money for a 100,000 word book, it can cost $2,000 to $6,000 just for editing. I'm actually someone who would not recommend most self-publishing authors pay for editing. And I know that comes across as sort of a shock for a lot of people, because most self-publishing gurus or experts will tell you you have to treat your book like a business, you have to be professional, so you have to pay for an editor because your book has to be flawless. I disagree with that on a few levels, but the main reason is this. For a fiction book, we'll talk about fiction first. For fiction, readers need a good story, and that's all that really matters. You'll be able to succeed as an author even if it has some mistakes, even if the writing is not very good, as long as the story is great, the story is excellent. And the problem with paying for editing is that usually when you pay, even if you pay thousands of dollars for editing, they rarely will help you to fix the story. And that's going to be a major problem, because if you pay thousands of dollars for editing and they fix all of your writing, they take out all the typos and the mistakes, there's no grammar errors, they even improve, like they do a line edit and they go through and they improve sentence structure and word choice, they make the writing polished and beautiful, none of that's going to matter if your story isn't satisfying, if it doesn't have a really strong conclusion, if it doesn't have believable characters that your readers like. Those are the kind of problems that will kill your book sales. Even if you have a very well-edited, clean, and professional book, that's not going to matter. It's not going to sell your book. You're not going to sell without a good story. And so the problem with paying an editor is that most of them aren't going to fix those core level problems. What you really need is beta readers or some kind of a writing group, so that before you even look at editing, your story is perfect. And a lot of that can be learned by yourself, which is why I'll link down to some books below, but there's a lot of books about the craft, about learning how to write better, about learning how to structure your novel, about character development. These are the things that you've got to learn how to do well before you write your novel. And as you're writing your novel, sometimes it takes many novels before you kind of learn how to integrate this knowledge into really powerful books. But once you have that down and your book is really good and your story is really good, if you're a good writer, I still don't think you need to pay for editing. And that's why you get to this point where, and it's because I read a lot of books, and self-published or traditionally published, rarely do I read a book that has no mistakes. There's always some typo or some grammatical mistake, always one or two in any book, even traditionally published. For indie published books, I try to look for, there should be less than 10 mistakes. Like when you're reading through the content, there should be less than 10 spelling mistakes, typos, or problems that are noticeable, because those can be really distracting. If you have hundreds of them, I don't want to say, anybody can be a writer. If you have a good story to tell, you should try to tell it, even if you are terrible at spelling and grammar. However, self-publishing is going to be more difficult for you if you can't spell and you're not good at English. If you can get those skills down. On the other hand, I should also say, even if you're great at English and your spelling is perfect and your grammar is perfect, you may not be very good at telling stories or writing characters that readers like. So it's kind of a two-way street. But in most cases, you can work on building your craft on your own. You can get early feedback from beta readers without paying for it, or by trading feedback with other writers if you join some writing groups. You can use that kind of feedback to focus on fixing the real core problems of your book first, the things that really matter, to get the story right, to get the characters right. Once you have all that, you can start going through and polishing it yourself. As long as you get down to the point where there's less than 10 mistakes, I don't think you need to pay thousands of dollars extra for someone else to find those mistakes. Because what's really going to happen is you'll publish. Hopefully you've got some beta readers already. If you're building your list, or if you're in part of a writing group at least, you can send your final book out to beta readers, and they can help you to find those typos. If there's less than 10, they'll circle them. You'll get almost all of them, and you can publish, and I wouldn't really worry about it. If you have less than 10 typos or grammar problems, your readers aren't really going to need to post negative reviews. It's only when you get 25 or so, probably like a typo every 2,000 or 3,000 words, you get a typo or grammar problem. Like if it's on every page, that's when readers are going to stop reading because there's too many problems, it's too distracting. But probably you can self-edit to the point where if you get the story right and you get most of those grammatical errors away, or typos or spelling problems, if you get rid of those, you don't have to spend a lot of money on book editing. The reason you would want to spend a lot of money is if you're not a very good writer, or you're not very good with story development or content or characters, and you have spelling and grammar mistakes, you're going to need to pay a lot of money for editing. And even then, it's not really going to be worth it, because what an editor will do, an editor will look at your story. A good editor, if you're paying extra for content, like a manuscript review kind of thing, which is usually an extra package. It might be a lot more expensive because you need very qualified writers who know how to write good stories, who will be able to give you the right kind of writing feedback. And what you're really paying for is something like a writing coach, because they'll look at your story and they'll say, this chapter needs to be cut, this chapter needs to be moved over here, there's no motivation for this character, or this character isn't likable, or why does this character do this thing, or this ending isn't satisfying at all. A really good editor will tell you those problems, and they'll suggest ways you can improve it. But in that case, you're really almost hiring a writing coach or even a ghostwriter who's telling you how to fix your story. And that can be worth it if it's your first book. If you want to make it a career, that's fine, but you could probably pay less to get some writing classes, to go to an actual writing class and learn the craft and learn how to put stories together, or just read a whole bunch of books. There are 3 or 4 really good books on structure or character development that you can read and learn and practice, and you'll get rid of all of those problems. The other thing you're paying for, if you've actually fixed your story, you're just paying for a proofreader who's just going to fix the mistakes. And like I said, there are better ways to get most of those mistakes with beta readers or a writing group without you needing to really spend thousands of dollars to do it. For fiction. For nonfiction, it's a little bit different, because the main thing is just the content. People read nonfiction books to learn something, so you've got to have good content that teaches them something. For nonfiction, it's got to be pretty clean, because you're also building your professional credibility, and you're trying to teach them something. They're not really going to trust what you have to say if it's not clean. So it may be worth, and you don't really need to worry about content so much, as long as you have, as long as you're giving a lot of knowledge and it sort of makes sense. Story is still important, and it's really important to have kind of a flow and some story in your nonfiction, because that's what people pay attention to. But it's less important than a fiction novel where it has to really be very satisfying. As long as the nonfiction, gives them information, they feel that they learned something, they're going to be okay. For nonfiction, if you're publishing a book to build your professional reputation, if it's part of your credibility, then yes, I think editing is probably worth the investment, because you're not just publishing a book for profit. You're publishing a book to build your reputation or your business. If that's not the case, if you're only publishing for profit, which a lot of my friends are, they publish a lot of nonfiction books. In that case, I still maybe wouldn't recommend editing. If you can get it down to the point where you want to check it really well, but hopefully you'll get most of the typos, or if you start building your list, you can give prizes or ask for feedback or ask for help. You can even, I'll usually just put in the front of your book, you can say, I'm a self-publishing author. I don't have a huge budget for editing. If you happen to notice any mistakes or spelling errors or grammar that you find in this book, I would really appreciate if you could email me and let me know and put your email in the front of the book. If you get a lot of downloads, there's a good chance that somebody out there will read your book and also take the time to highlight the spelling or grammar mistakes. That's not so hard for somebody to do. And it also kind of helps you build a relationship with the reader, which is important. So there are ways around spending. And if you want to publish to make money, you need to think, if I'm going to spend $2,000 or $3,000 on editing, is this book going to earn me that money back? If it's not going to earn you the money back, then you're just vanity publishing. It's a hobby. It's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you want to be a professional writer, a business writer, you need to be making income from your books, which means your what do you call it? The amount coming in has to be more than the amount going out. So you can't pay $5,000 to publish each book if you're only going to make, $2,000 a year. It's going to take you a long time to earn that money back. So depending on where you are as an author, you definitely can spend a lot of money to publish your book and to pay for editing, but I don't think it's the most necessary thing that you need to pay for. If you want to learn more about common editing mistakes or self-editing tips, I have a free book on our editing website that you can download. I'll put the link down below. Thanks. Bye-bye.